She hid the scar she got protecting a pup, not knowing the Alpha King watched her burn for his son. The first light of dawn struggled to pierce through the heavy fog that clung to the edges of the forest. Here, in this secluded corner of the kingdom, life moved slowly. People tended their small gardens, children chased one another along dirt paths, and the quiet murmurs of the village elders mixed with the calls of birds. But beneath the calm, a tension lingered, an unspoken feeling that the world beyond the forest's edge was waiting, watching, always beyond reach. Lyra moved along the narrow path that led to the heart of the village, her steps soft but deliberate. She held a small bundle close to her chest, a wolf pup with fur as dark as midnight, its golden eyes blinking sleepily up at her. The pup had been orphaned in a fire weeks ago, and though it had taken time, Lyra had nursed it back to health. Her heart ached for the little creature as if it were her own child. Every day, she made sure it had food, warmth, and comfort. But the pup was not the only thing she protected. Lyra bore a scar across her left arm, a long, jagged mark she had gotten during the fire that had claimed the pup's mother. The memory of that night still haunted her, though she had long learned to hide it beneath long sleeves and careful smiles. She rarely spoke of it. The villagers, though friendly, did not know the full story, and truthfully, she did not wish to tell anyone. Not yet. The forest that bordered the village held secrets of its own. Trees grew taller than the highest towers in the distant cities, their branches twisted into shapes that looked almost like fingers reaching for the sky. At night, shadows moved strangely between them, as if the forest itself were alive, whispering warnings to those who wandered too close. Lyra had always felt safe there, yet tonight she felt a strange shiver crawling up her spine. Something was watching her, something patient, and its eyes were not of this world. Far beyond the forest, high in his fortress of black stone and silver towers, King Kale, the Alpha King of the Northern Realm, observed the village through enchanted glass. From his perch, he could see everything: the movement of people, the way the wind stirred the leaves, even the faint heat of fire that still lingered in Lyra's arm from the past. And he had seen her that night of the fire too, the courage that had driven her to run into danger to save something she loved. Even now, as she cradled the small pup, she burned in his memory, not with flame but with a quiet, radiant bravery that no power could touch. Yet Kale's interest was not simple admiration. He was a king bound by rules older than the stones of his castle, and nothing in his life could bend to desire. His son, Prince Kaelin, lived under a curse whispered about across kingdoms. The boy could not survive the nights without a human guide, someone willing to walk beside him through darkness that would suffocate ordinary souls. Many had tried, all had failed, and now, unknown to Lyra, fate had begun to weave their lives together. The village stirred with news that morning. A royal messenger, clad in armor that gleamed even in the fog, rode into the square atop a white horse. Children scattered with delight and curiosity, while adults whispered anxiously, wondering what decree the king had sent this time. The messenger dismounted with a flourish and unfurled a scroll, the edges sealed with the royal crest, a silver wolf entwined with a crescent moon. "By the command of the Alpha King," he read aloud, "a guide shall be chosen from this village to escort Prince Kaelin to the northern fortress. The chosen one must be courageous, pure of heart, and unafraid to face darkness." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Many glanced at each other, wondering who among them would dare step forward. Lyra's fingers tightened around the pup, her heart hammering. Courage, pure of heart, unafraid to face darkness. She had never imagined that the life she led quietly among trees and hearths could call her to such a dangerous task. And yet, she felt a strange pull, a trembling in her chest that whispered this was no accident. The village elders stepped forward to choose. Their eyes swept across the gathered people, lingering on Lyra longer than most. When her name was spoken, a hush fell over the crowd. Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears. She had not volunteered. She had only lived quietly, tending her small charges and keeping her secrets. And now she would be the one to walk beside a cursed prince whose life depended on her bravery. Lyra's mother clasped her hand, eyes full of worry. "Be careful, child," she whispered. "The king's son, the forest, I do not know what waits." Lyra nodded, hiding the tremor in her voice. "I will be careful," she promised, though neither of them truly knew what lay ahead. The journey began at dusk. Lyra strapped the pup gently into a satchel, its head peeking out, and set off with the royal escort guiding her toward the north. The forest thickened as they walked, the mist growing heavier, curling around trees like fingers. Lyra's thoughts turned inward. She remembered the fire, the screams, the smell of smoke that had haunted her dreams for weeks. Her arm throbbed faintly beneath her sleeve, the scar a constant reminder of her courage and her pain. Night fell, and with it came the whispers of the forest. Lyra thought she heard movement beyond the trees, shadows that were too deliberate to be mere animals. She tightened her grip on the pup and whispered softly, "Don't be afraid. I won't let anything happen to you." The pup blinked up at her, trusting her completely, and for a moment the world felt still and safe. But far above the village, Kale watched. His eyes followed Lyra's path with a focus that bordered on obsession. He saw the small flame of courage that burned within her, a light she did not know was visible to others. Even as the forest whispered around her, even as the night pressed in, she remained unbroken. And something stirred in him, a feeling he had not expected. Desire was forbidden, curiosity was dangerous, but admiration could not be contained. As the group approached the edge of the forest, a sudden movement made Lyra freeze. A low growl echoed through the trees, and a figure stepped from the shadows. A wolf, larger than any she had ever seen, with fur that shimmered silver in the moonlight. Its eyes locked onto the pup in her satchel, and the air seemed to thrum with power. Lyra's heart raced, but she did not panic. Slowly she knelt and placed a hand on the pup's head. "Stay behind me," she whispered. Her other hand reached for a walking stick, not a weapon but a support, a symbol of her resolve. The wolf tilted its head, regarding her carefully. It did not advance, yet it did not retreat. Lyra could feel its power, a silent warning that the forest and its creatures were not to be underestimated. Then a voice, soft yet commanding, carried through the trees. "She is brave." Lyra's breath caught. No one was near, yet the voice felt real. Her heart pounded. The wolf lowered its head slightly, as if acknowledging the presence of someone far more powerful. Lyra's instincts told her to run, but something held her in place, a mixture of fear and awe. Far away in his fortress, Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. He had spoken from the shadows, though she could not hear him, and yet the effect was undeniable. The wolf, a guardian of the forest, had paused. It recognized her bravery. It recognized her heart. And it recognized something else, that this girl, this mortal, carried within her a strength that even kings could not command. The night grew colder, and the forest seemed to breathe around her. Lyra wrapped the pup closer, whispering comfort into its small ears. She did not know what the coming days would bring. She did not know the curses, the power, or the darkness that waited in the northern fortress. She only knew that she must move forward, for the pup, for herself, and for the unspoken fate that was drawing her into a world larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And somewhere high above, in the towers of a dark fortress, eyes watched her with intensity that bordered on obsession. The Alpha King knew her courage. He knew the scar she hid. And without her knowing it, he had begun to burn for her bravery, just as the fires of the past had burned her arm, though the fire he felt was far more complicated, far more dangerous. Lyra did not know that she was being watched, and she did not know that the path she had stepped onto was already tangled with fate. But as she stepped deeper into the shadows of the forest, she felt a thrill, a trembling excitement beneath her fear. Something was coming. Something powerful. and her heart, scarred though it was, beat with anticipation. The forest seemed to lean closer, whispering secrets she could not yet understand. And as she lifted her head to the moonlight filtering through the canopy, Lyra could not help but wonder. Was she truly ready for what waited in the north? The northern fortress rose from the mist like a giant carved from stone and shadow. Towers pierced the sky, sharp as silver knives, and the walls seemed alive with whispered secrets. No sunlight reached its courtyards, only the pale reflection of the moonlight on black stone. To anyone looking at it, the fortress was forbidding, a place where mortals dared not tread. Yet Lyra, carrying the pup snug against her chest, could not turn back. Her steps echoed against the cold stone as the royal escort guided her through the gates. Guards with armor polished like mirrors flanked the wide halls, their eyes unreadable. Each echo of her boots reminded her of how far she had come from the small, misty village she called home. Her heart thumped in her chest, not with fear, though there was some, but with a strange mixture of anticipation and unease. Ahead of her, a pair of massive doors opened into a chamber larger than any hall she had ever seen. Candles flickered along the walls, and tapestries of past kings and queens swayed gently as if breathing with the castle. At the center, enclosed in a golden cage that shimmered with protective runes, sat Prince Kaelin. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and his golden eyes, bright as dawn, met hers immediately. There was something in his gaze, vulnerability wrapped in cold strength, as if he had built walls around himself that no one could break. Lyra's pulse quickened. She had seen courage before, but she had never felt its weight like this. She knelt slightly to meet the pup's eyes, feeling the small creature tremble in the unfamiliar grandeur. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll keep you safe." Kaelin did not speak, but his eyes measured her carefully, like a wary animal. He had been alone for so long, protected yet imprisoned by the curse that ruled his nights, that trust did not come easily. Lyra's presence was a ripple in his stagnant world, and though he wanted to pull away, he could not deny the warmth she carried. From a shadowed balcony above, King Kael watched them silently. His expression was unreadable, though every muscle in his face was tense. He had seen many guides try and fail, and most left with tears or fear or both. Lyra was different. Her courage did not scream. It glowed quietly, steadily, and it intrigued him more than he expected. He clenched his fists, reminding himself that fascination was dangerous. He was a king, and desire had no place here. "You will accompany him," the captain of the guard said formally to Lyra. "He requires your care through the nights. His condition is delicate." "Any mistake could have consequences," Lyra nodded. "I understand." Her voice was calm, though her heart hammered. She could feel the pup shifting against her, sensing her tension. She took a slow breath. This was no longer a forest path. This was a kingdom built on fear, power, and ancient magic, and she had stepped into its heart. Over the first few days, Lyra learned the rhythm of Kaelin's life. He awoke at dusk, tired from a day that seemed longer than it should be. His curse flared unpredictably, and even the smallest sound or shadow could trigger an overwhelming reaction. Lyra's patience was tested every hour, yet she never faltered. She spoke softly, moved slowly, and held the pup close to remind both herself and Kaelin that small comforts could anchor even the most fragile heart. Kaelin, at first, resisted her care. He recoiled when she approached, sharp words spilling from his lips like knives. "Stay away," he hissed one night, his hands trembling despite his effort to appear composed. "I do not need help." Lyra did not flinch. She knelt at a safe distance, her eyes steady and calm. "You do not have to trust me," she said softly, "but I will stay. I won't leave, and I won't hurt you, not now, not ever." For a long moment, Kaelin's golden eyes flickered with something unrecognizable, hesitation, fear, perhaps the faintest trace of longing. Lyra did not move. She only waited, a silent anchor amid his storm. Meanwhile, Kael's presence lingered like a shadow over every corridor. He did not enter the chambers, he only watched. He saw the way Lyra moved, her careful steps, her gentle voice, her unwavering courage. She was human, fragile in appearance, yet there was a fire in her that rivaled the strongest steel. The Alpha King did not allow himself to be swayed by mere mortals, yet he found he could not look away. One night as the moon bathed the fortress in silver light, Kaelin's curse flared violently. He screamed, not in pain but in frustration, in fear of the darkness that clawed at his mind. Lyra rushed to his side, the pup clinging to her chest. She reached through the golden cage, her hand hovering just above his arm. "Breathe with me," she urged, her voice calm but firm. "You are not alone." Kaelin's breath hitched, the curse trying to push him into isolation, to make him believe that even she would abandon him. But something in Lyra's steady gaze and the warmth radiating from her small, scarred hand held him. Slowly, shakily, he mirrored her breathing. In the shadows of the cage, a connection began to form, silent, fragile, but real. From his high tower, Kael watched, unable to intervene. Rage and awe clashed within him. How could a mortal, so small, hold the prince's spirit while he, the king, could not? Yet even as he felt the sting of inadequacy, a part of him recognized that Lyra's courage was different from any he had seen. It burned not for power or reward, but for something purer, something that demanded respect. Days turned into weeks. Lyra's presence became a constant in Kaelin's life. He began to open, slowly, cautiously. They shared stories in whispers, laughter that barely escaped the cage, and moments of quiet understanding. The pup became a bridge between them, the small creature allowing Kaelin to see trust as possible, even in a world that had taught him fear. But power dynamics remained. Lyra, though small and mortal, wielded influence over Kaelin's fragile moments of vulnerability. Kaelin, though cursed, had an innate strength that could dominate any room with his presence. And Kael, watching from above, carried the weight of authority, control, and a longing he dared not name. The tension between the three was electric, unspoken yet undeniable. One evening, the three of them faced the first real test. A sudden tremor shook the fortress, a reminder that the curse was more than a personal affliction. It was tied to the very magic of the northern lands. Kaelin's cage shimmered, runes flickering as the darkness tried to break through. Lyra instinctively stepped forward, her small hand touching the glowing metal. "Hold on to me," she whispered, her eyes locking with his. "We face this together." Kaelin hesitated. The curse whispered lies in his ear, urging him to push her away, to embrace solitude as safety. But the warmth of her hand, the determination in her eyes, reminded him that even in darkness, one could choose connection over isolation. Slowly he placed his hand over hers, and for a brief moment the cage's glow softened. From his tower, Kael's expression hardened. He had wanted to protect Kaelin, to control the outcome. Yet here was Lyra, fearless and unyielding, teaching the prince a lesson that no king could impose. Courage was not given by title or bloodline. It was chosen, nurtured, and sometimes discovered in another's touch. The night passed in a tense, fragile calm. Kaelin slept finally, curled against the cage bars, while Lyra remained close, her hand resting on his arm as the pup nestled against her chest. The fortress, dark and silent, seemed almost alive, breathing in the lessons of trust and bravery that had been forged in its halls. As dawn approached, Lyra took a quiet moment for herself. She examined her arm, the scar hidden beneath her sleeve. It was a reminder of her past, of fires faced and dangers survived. And she realized something. Courage, like scars, was both visible and hidden. It could burn quietly, shape lives, and even captivate kings. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound, footsteps on the balcony above. Kael's shadow fell across the room, not threatening but watchful. Lyra did not startle. She had grown used to being observed. Yet the intensity in his gaze made her pulse quicken. He did not speak, did not move closer. He only lingered, silent, watching. "You are stronger than I expected," he said finally, his voice low but carrying authority that made the walls themselves seem to listen. Lyra nodded, unsure whether to reply. "I do what I must," she said simply. "Always." Kale's eyes softened for the briefest moment. He had witnessed her courage, her compassion, and her unwavering heart. And though he was a king bound by duty, rules, and ancient power, he realized that desire and admiration had already taken root. But it was dangerous, forbidden, unspoken for now. Kalen stirred, lifting his head to see Lyra kneeling beside him, the pup pressed against her chest. He blinked at her with a mixture of trust and curiosity, and for the first time he allowed himself to wonder. Could someone truly care for him, not because of his title or curse, but because of who he was underneath it all? The forest of the northern land stretched endlessly beyond the fortress walls. Shadows moved within it, alive and watchful. The prince was learning trust. The mortal girl was learning courage beyond her own fears. And the king was learning that even power could be challenged by something as simple, yet profound, as bravery and compassion. The night faded slowly, leaving only quiet whispers in the halls. Lyra, Kalen, and the pup rested together, a fragile but growing bond forming in the silence. And high above, Kale continued to watch, aware that the coming days would test them all in ways that none could foresee. The fortress had never seemed darker than it did that night. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching across the stone floors like living threads. Even the moonlight, silver and cold, seemed hesitant as it fell through the narrow windows. Lyra moved cautiously, the pup nestled against her chest. Each step echoed with purpose. She could feel that something was shifting, not just in the fortress but in the very air around them. Kalen walked slightly ahead, his golden eyes sharp and alert. The curse had been growing stronger, its invisible tendrils wrapping tighter around him. It made him restless, anxious, and sometimes cruel, not out of choice, but because the darkness inside him demanded release. Lyra had learned to read the signs, the tremor in his hands, the way his eyes flicked to shadows, the subtle tightening of his jaw. She had learned, too, that her own courage could soothe him, if only for a moment. "You cannot run from it," she whispered as they entered the lower halls of the fortress, catacombs that had been sealed for centuries. "The darkness is part of you, but it does not have to define you." Kalen did not answer immediately. He rarely spoke unless necessary. Yet his shoulders relaxed slightly, a small gesture that told Lyra he was listening. The catacombs were a maze of twisting corridors, lined with ancient statues and carvings that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. A faint, magical hum lingered in the air, old power left behind by kings long dead. Lyra felt it brush against her, a tingling sensation that raised goosebumps along her arms. She glanced at Kalen. "This place is old magic," she said. "It might be why your curse feels stronger here." Kalen's lips pressed into a thin line. "It is not the place," he said quietly. "It is me." Lyra shook her head. "No, the curse uses you." "It is not you." She reached out her hand but did not touch him, letting her presence speak for her. "You are stronger than it, you just have to remember that." For a long moment, Kalen's eyes softened. He wanted to believe her, to trust her words. But the darkness was patient, whispering lies and old fears. He closed his eyes and let the quiet warmth of Lyra's courage wrap around him like a shield. Above them, in his tower, King Kale watched with the weight of centuries on his shoulders. He had ruled with power and precision, yet Lyra's presence unsettled him. She was mortal, yet fearless, fragile, yet capable of holding Kalen's spirit steady when he could not. He felt a strange mix of admiration and frustration. How could a human teach his son lessons that no royal decree or guard could enforce? Yet the truth burned deep inside him. He was powerless against her impact. The silence of the catacombs was shattered by a sudden surge of energy. A wall of shadow rolled through the corridor, curling like smoke but solid, thrumming with intent. Kalen's curse flared immediately, his golden eyes glowing with a strange light, and he stumbled, gripping the stone walls to steady himself. Lyra acted without thinking. She stepped forward, placing herself between him and the advancing darkness, her small hand pressed against his shoulder. "Trust me," she said, her voice steady, calm, unyielding. "We face it together." Kalen hesitated, the curse whispering that isolation was safety. He wanted to push her away, to protect her from the danger that clung to him. But something in her eyes, something in the warmth radiating from her courage, made him pause. Slowly, shakily, he mirrored her stance, letting her guide him through the energy that pulsed like a living thing. The shadows recoiled, almost recognizing that the bond between them was stronger than the darkness itself. For a brief shining moment, the curse's power faltered, allowing Kalen to breathe without fear. Lyra's heart raced, not with triumph but with relief. She had not only helped him survive the night, she had helped him remember that trust and courage could fight back even against ancient magic. "You held it back," Kalen whispered, his voice tinged with awe. "You didn't have to." Lyra smiled faintly, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "I did, because I believe in you." The words hung in the air, delicate and powerful. Kalen wanted to respond, wanted to say more, but the moment was broken by a low rumble from deeper within the catacombs. The walls trembled, and dust fell in tiny showers from the ceiling. Kale's eyes narrowed. Something had awakened in the fortress, something tied not just to the curse but to the very lineage of his blood. He realized that the coming days would test not only Kalen and Lyra, but himself as well. He had power, armies, and authority, yet none of it could shield them from the forces now stirring in the northern lands. Lyra, sensing the tension, pressed a hand gently against Kalen's arm. "We'll face it," she said softly. "Whatever it is, we face it together." Kalen looked at her, truly looked, and saw not only a mortal girl but a beacon of courage that refused to waver. He realized that she had become the center of something larger than either of them, a bond that could challenge the shadows themselves. The following days brought new challenges. Lyra learned more about Kalen's curse, how it sapped his energy, how it twisted his emotions, and how it left him vulnerable to the fortress's hidden magic. She discovered that the key to controlling it was not brute strength, but calm, steady presence. Her hands, her words, even the quiet way she carried the pup, all these small actions helped Kalen maintain his humanity in the face of his own darkness. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Kalen began to open to her. He laughed quietly when the pup chased its own tail, smiled faintly when she told stories of the village, and occasionally allowed himself to rest his head against her shoulder. Each moment of trust was a victory, each small connection a triumph against the curse that had shaped his entire life. Yet the fortress held more than shadows and curses. There were whispers of the past, old kings who had fallen to ambition, old magic that had turned on its wielders, and secrets that were not meant for mortal ears. Lyra sensed the weight of these hidden forces, and she realized that courage alone might not be enough. Wisdom, patience, and the ability to see beyond fear would be just as vital. Kale, from his tower, observed every movement. He had tried to remain distant, a silent protector from above. But seeing Lyra and Kalen together, witnessing the trust that grew between them, stirred emotions he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Admiration had become fascination, fascination had edged toward longing, and longing was a dangerous thing for a king who believed in control above all else. One evening, as a pale moon rose over the fortress towers, a sudden tremor shook the halls. Lyra and Kalen were in the catacombs, and the shadows responded immediately. The air thickened, and Kalen's eyes flared with golden light. The curse was reaching for him, testing boundaries, seeking weakness. Lyra's hand shot out, holding his wrist firmly. "Focus on me," she urged, her voice strong, unshakable. "We are here together. Nothing can touch you while I am near." Kaelin's breathing hitched, but slowly he drew strength from her calm presence. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if recognizing that their target was no longer alone. Lyra's courage and trust anchored him, and together they pushed back the darkness, step by step, breath by breath. In the distance, a door creaked open. Kael's shadow fell across the floor of the catacombs, and Lyra felt the faintest stir of awe mixed with wariness. He did not approach directly, but his presence was undeniable. "You are extraordinary," he said quietly, voice carrying authority and something softer, something unspoken. "Few could do what you have done." Lyra met his gaze steadily, neither intimidated nor afraid. "I do what I must," she replied. "Always." Kael's eyes softened for a moment, and he turned away, leaving them alone with the shadows that still lingered. He knew that what Lyra was teaching Kaelin could not be taught by kings, armies, or even magic. She was teaching him something far older, far deeper, the strength of trust, courage, and heart. As the night drew to a close, Lyra allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her scar burned faintly beneath her sleeve, a reminder of the fire she had survived, the choices she had made, and the courage that had carried her through. She realized that bravery was not only about facing external dangers, it was also about facing oneself, one's fears, and one's heart. Kaelin, exhausted but calmer, leaned slightly toward her. He had begun to understand that trust could be more powerful than fear, that connection could defy even the darkest magic. And for the first time, he felt a small spark of hope, hope that perhaps the curse was not the end of him, but the beginning of something new. The fortress remained silent, yet alive. Shadows lingered, waiting, watching, as if aware that their challenge was far from over. And high above, Kael continued to watch, realizing that the coming days would demand more than courage. They would demand heart, wisdom, and the strength to choose love even in the face of darkness. The fortress was silent, yet it hummed with a quiet tension. The shadows that had lingered in the halls for centuries seemed heavier, more restless. The northern winds howled against the black stone towers, carrying a chill that cut to the bone. Lyra stood at the edge of the catacomb corridor, her hand resting gently on the pup's soft fur. The golden eyes of the little creature mirrored her own determination. Kaelin sat beside her, his back pressed against the cold stone. He was weaker than usual. The curse had been stronger in the last hours, but his gaze, though tired, held a quiet resolve. "Lyra," he whispered, voice trembling slightly, I don't know if I can do this." She shook her head, firm but gentle. "You can. You've already faced it. The curse is part of you, yes, but it does not control you, not while we face it together." Kaelin looked at her, searching for some hidden strength he could cling to. And in her eyes he found it, a courage that came not from magic, nor from title, nor from any force outside herself, but from the purity of her heart. Above them in the towers, Kael stood watching. The Alpha King had remained silent for days, torn between his duty to protect his son and the fascination that Lyra inspired in him. His pride and authority were challenged by her courage, her compassion, and her ability to reach Kaelin in ways he, a king, could not. And yet, for the first time, he understood that power alone was never enough. Some battles could only be won with heart. The catacombs trembled. Ancient magic responded to the courage of the mortal girl and the prince she protected. Shadows twisted violently along the walls, and the golden glow of Kaelin's eyes flared in protest. The curse, sensing its hold weakening, lashed out in desperation. Lyra took a steadying breath. She stepped closer to Kaelin, placing her hand over his. "I'm here," she said softly. "Not because I have to be, but because I want to be. You are not alone." Kaelin's pulse quickened. He had spent so long in darkness, believing himself unworthy of trust, love, or loyalty. Yet here was Lyra, fragile but unyielding, offering him something he had never dared hope for, acceptance and courage without condition. Slowly he nodded. "I trust you." Her fingers tightened around his, and in that simple gesture a spark of power ignited, not from magic, but from the bond of heart and courage. The shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing, unable to break the connection between mortal and prince. Kale's lips pressed into a thin line as he watched. He could not intervene, yet his presence seemed to guide the outcome. He had learned to observe and wait, to allow trust and bravery to grow in the hearts of those he cared for. And in doing so, he realized that even a king could learn from a mortal girl who bore her scars with pride. Hours passed, though time seemed suspended in the catacombs. The shadows pressed and flailed, trying to separate Kalen from Lyra, but their bond only strengthened. Kalen's golden eyes, once flickering with fear, now shone steadily. Lyra's steady heart anchored him, her courage giving him the strength to confront the curse head-on. Finally, in a burst of light that shimmered like silver fire, the shadows dissipated. The curse, unable to overcome the bond of trust and courage, faltered and then broke. Kalen collapsed into Lyra's arms, not in weakness but in relief. The weight that had burdened him for years, the constant fear, the isolation, the darkness that had whispered lies was gone, at least for now. Lyra held him, her hand brushing against his hair. "It's over," she whispered. "You're free." Kalen's lips curved in a small, tentative smile. "Thanks to you," he said quietly. I could not have done it alone." The pup yipped softly, pressing its head against Kalen's side as if celebrating the victory. Lyra allowed herself a small smile, feeling the warmth of triumph and relief. She had not only helped Kalen survive the curse, but she had helped him discover that trust and courage could defeat even the darkest magic. High above, Kale exhaled slowly. He had watched, powerless yet profoundly moved. He realized that his son's redemption had been guided not by a king's command, but by the strength of a mortal girl's heart. And in that realization, he felt something he had long denied himself: admiration, gratitude, and a quiet, cautious longing. The morning sun broke over the fortress towers, casting long golden rays into the halls. Lyra stepped outside with Kalen, the pup padding happily at her feet. The air smelled of fresh stone and pine, a promise of new beginnings. The curse had been broken, but the lessons remained: trust, courage, and love could reshape even the darkest corners of life. Kalen walked beside Lyra, not leaning on her but choosing to stay close. He had learned that true strength was not about power or fear, but about connection, compassion, and bravery. His golden eyes met hers, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The bond they had forged could never be broken. Kale emerged from the shadows of the tower, finally stepping into the light. Lyra and Kalen both looked at him, unsure of his intentions. But the Alpha King's expression was not one of anger or authority. It was one of respect, tempered with something softer, something warmer. "You have done well," Kale said quietly, his gaze sweeping from Kalen to Lyra. "Both of you." Lyra inclined her head, feeling the weight of the words. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she replied simply. "But Kalen's strength, he faced the curse as much as I did." Kale nodded slowly. "Indeed. And he learned what I have learned as well, that courage and heart are sometimes stronger than even the most ancient power." The three stood together in the dawn light, the fortress behind them no longer a place of fear, but a witness to triumph. The pup bounded ahead, playful and free, reminding them of the simple joys often forgotten in a world of power and curses. Kalen turned to Lyra, his golden eyes soft and steady. "I owe you my life," he said. "And more than that, you've given me something I thought I'd never have." Lyra smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "You had it all along," she said softly. "You just had to believe it." Kale watched silently, understanding that this moment was larger than any throne or crown. Redemption had been earned, bonds had been forged, and hearts had been transformed. And for the first time in years, he felt hope, not as a king, but as a father, as a man, and as someone who had learned to see the strength of the human heart. The fortress gates opened, and the sunlight poured through, washing the halls in gold. Lyra and Kaelin stepped into the light, ready to face a world that had once seemed impossible. Kael followed them, not as a ruler commanding obedience, but as a witness to courage, love, and redemption. The pup yipped happily, circling around them, a small reminder that life, in all its simplicity and innocence, could heal even the deepest wounds. Lyra brushed a hand across her scar, feeling the faint burn that reminded her of her past trials. But this time the scar did not sting with pain or regret. It reminded her of courage, of the choices she had made, and of the bond she had forged with Kaelin. Kaelin reached for her hand and she took it, fingers entwining naturally. It was a silent promise. Trust, courage, and heart would guide them, even in the darkest of days. And high above, Kael looked toward the horizon, understanding that while battles could be won and curses could be broken, the greatest power was the one they had discovered together: the ability to love, to trust, and to hope. The northern fortress, once a place of shadows and fear, now stood as a monument to transformation. Inside its walls, scars had been healed, curses had been broken, and hearts had been changed forever. Lyra, Kaelin, and even Kael had learned that bravery was not about fighting alone. It was about facing darkness together, hand in hand, heart to heart. As the sun rose higher, spilling gold across the towers, Lyra whispered to the pup, "We survived. And now so can the rest of the world." Kaelin smiled beside her, his golden eyes bright with life. "Together," he said, and in that moment the fortress seemed to breathe with them, alive and renewed. Shadows no longer threatened, curses no longer haunted, and hearts, scarred, tested, and brave, stood ready to face whatever came next. For in the end, courage, trust, and love had triumphed over darkness. And that was a magic stronger than any curse, any shadow, and any king.